If you'd like to be seated now, I'm going to invite two of Fergus's children are going to say some words of appreciation, so Grace and Frank are going to come and do that for us now.
My father, Fergus Armstrong, grew up in Ballywhelan, near the village of Ross's Point, County Sligo. His beloved mother, Sheila née Fitzsimons, was born in Liverpool to Irish immigrant parents, but moved to Sligo with her rascal brother, Brian, who became, as Dad put it, one of two fathers. His doting real father, Frank, a solicitor, originally from Tubbercurry in Sligo, took great pride in his high-flying son's successes. His father's sister, Margaret, a doctor living in Connecticut, was also a formative influence, instilling a lifelong quest for self-improvement and cultural appreciation. The Armstrongs were a clan of border reivers from southern Scotland, notorious for brigandage, perhaps explaining a quietly rebellious streak. Fergus's Tubbercurry great-grandfather, Luke Armstrong, was a notable Fenian and member of the IRB acquitted of a capital crime in 1884. Later, he was one of four elder men who brought rifles for the volunteers. In return, the family home was burnt by the Black and Tans. After primary schooling in the village of Ross's Point, where Fergus was one of a class of only three, he attended secondary school in Castleknock College in Dublin. Boarding school proved a trial, although he made lifelong friends during that time. It is fair to say that the rugby pitch was not the preferred terrain of this sensitive, asthmatic teenager. He recently revealed that his finest moment, a length of the pitch try, was spoilt by the discovery that the referee had blown his whistle well beforehand. As a child, he excelled as a musician, winning awards for the violin at Fleadh. He maintained a passion throughout his life for classical music, taking particular pleasure in later years from vinyl recordings of great operatic singers of the early 20th century, including John McCormack and Mattia Battistini, and hosted innumerable public concerts in his home. Fergus was a gifted student, winning a scholarship to study law in UCD. He recalled a career guidance counselor recommending he study medicine, but chose to follow in his father's footsteps. At UCD, he excelled academically, going on to study for a master's in Harvard University alongside another law student from the west of Ireland, Mary Robinson. He made numerous lifelong friends while at Earlsford Terrace, where UCD was at the time, including one Jacqueline Fitzgerald. Legal practice began with an apprenticeship in his father's firm of Howley Armstrong, before work in McCann Fitzgerald Solicitors, where he was first a protege of Michael Williams. There he also met Jacqueline's father, Alexis. In later life, he would say that he became a disciple of Alexis, whose intellectual pursuits and questioning religious faith he shared. He would find many other teachers, healers, and poets along the way, including David and Phyllis Ford, Micheál O'Shiel, Joan O'Donovan, Alistair Rowan, Noel Dorr, Mike Boxall, Vincent McNamara, and of course Joe Dunn. He belonged to an ecumenical prayer group for many years and a Tuesday meditation circle. Exactly a week before his death, unfortunately, this had to be conducted on Zoom. In 1962, Fergus became auditor of the Young Solicitors Debating Society. A contemporary newspaper account recalls his inaugural speech as one of the most provocative papers read before the Society for quite a number of years, and it has since stirred much comment in legal circles. The title of his paper was Volumus Mutare, We Are Willing to Change, a challenge to the conservatism of the time-honored motto Nollimus Mutare, resist change, inscribed over the doorway of King's Inns. In or around this period, Uncle Brian was also on the scene as a student in the King's Inns, allowing Fergus to wage his subversive campaign against the rival profession on another front. He later recalled assisting his errant uncle in cheating during one of the latter's repeated attempts to pass his final examinations to become a barrister. Brian had rigged up a shortwave radio that he concealed in a pocket for the oral examination, enabling him to communicate with his loyal nephew on the outside, who could supply answers to the questions submitted. He would even send his only son on a stealth intelligence-gathering mission into the bowels of the enemy to qualify as a barrister at the King's Inns. But any professional animus was never personal. He had good barrister friends, including Tom, his son-in-law. Fergus also practiced for some years as a solicitor in Sligo, in his father's firm, and became an in-house attorney at Aer Lingus. There he made important contacts, including with the businessman Tony Ryan, with whom he enjoyed a close working relationship through GPA, where more lasting friendships were formed. In McCann Fitzgerald, he became managing partner and chairman of the firm. According to the current chairman, Catherine Dean, Fergus was a hugely important influence, not only as a talented and brilliant lawyer from whom much could be learnt, but as a person who combined his powerful intellect with an abundant humility and humanity that made him a uniquely rich human being. As a lawyer, Fergus was a deal maker whose objective was to avoid conflict where possible, although he did not shrink from confronting corruption when he met it. Throughout his career, he questioned the nature and orientation of his profession, as well as wider economic structures. Recently, he expressed genuine guilt that he should be receiving any superior medical treatment as a private patient. Fergus was a searcher, particularly in the area of faith and spirituality, maintaining a simple Catholic faith in prayer alongside deep reading into theology and philosophy that brought an attention to and awareness of the body. He embraced mindfulness and meditation long before the adversarial nature of legal practice led him to embrace mediation, then a novel form of dispute resolution that brought him most career satisfaction. After retiring quietly from McCann Fitzgerald, he became a founding member of One Resolve. His innate sensitivity was brought to bear in a wide range of cases, including of sexual abuse, marital breakup, and a few complex commercial cases. He wrote that the mediation model asks parties to recognize they have a shared problem, suggesting that it reaches its full potential when the mediator is able to bring to the table a certain capacity that may be called a presence, a personal stillness that is evident even in a highly charged setting. This attribute will be hospitable to the parties. It will also support what may be considered the particular magic of mediation, a feature unmatched in the adversarial legal system. A certain kind of non-doing, he said, can be very powerful. After moving to Dublin, Fergus put down roots from 1975 in Whitebeam Avenue, Clonskee. He then moved to the madhouse down the road in a state of neglect on Whitebeam Road in 1992. It was reminiscent of the home he was brought up in, where the great tradition of Irish hospitality was upheld. It is only a pity that in recent times he has been unable to show off the great work of his architect son-in-law Mark. Their close personal relationship, living together for over 3 years, was crucial to bring a 3-decade-long project to stunning completion in league with other architects, builders and cleaners who form part of a community of action. Fergus also had a great love for Italy, its people, food and climate, learning Italian after his sister married an Italian, and it was poignant to listen to the bells ringing in the hamlet of Ceccanevi on the day of his passing. We now also have a connection to Greece through my brother, but not in-law, Dimitri, albeit Dad admitted defeat in his efforts to learn that language. He was absolutely adored by his daughters, as well as his sister-in-law, Vanessa, who became like his 4th daughter. With each of them, he enjoyed a special relationship. He also had great affection for his brother-in-law, Kieran, who was relied on at innumerable Sunday lunches for his current affairs opinions, as well as entertainment of aged aunts. As a father, he could be quite demanding at times, but it was always well-intentioned. He softened with age to become the most indulgent of fathers. He was my most important teacher. Under his tutelage, I learnt to write and edit. The devil is in the detail, he would say. It's desperately hard to know he's gone, but I know he did not want to be a burden on anyone. If there is a heaven, he's there for sure. With his beloved Jacqueline fussing over him as he attempts to mediate an adequate working arrangement between God and the devil. Due to the regulations, we are limited to inviting the Armstrongs and Fitzgerald families, Dad and Mum's close friends, and anyone who has travelled to please come to the Radisson down the road in Stillorgan for a meal after the burial from 2:30. Thank you.
I want to first thank a small number of people and, of course, to apologise to all the many people I won't be able to thank. Father Briscoe, our celebrant today of Dad's parish in Milltown, who has over the last 9 months ministered to Dad. Father O'Carroll, the parish priest of Donnybrook, for welcoming us today in the church where Mum and Dad were married. Maudie Donoghue and the amazing Olga for keeping the show on the road for us at home. The enormous number of spectacular family and friends who have been absolute stalwarts for us in the last few days. Mark and Dimitri for carrying us through the last few days, and Tom for his sterling work on this Mass. Dad, this is an impossible task. Being his daughter, I won't dwell on his vast capabilities as a lawyer and mediator. I'll only say he never failed to downplay his achievements and even dismiss them, preferring always to emphasize the contributions of others. He was, to us at least, an unlikely managing partner, cycling to work with his battered briefcase slung across him long before cycling was mainstream. His interests stretched from conflict resolution to psychology, theology, philosophy, literature, opera, Italian, and so much more. In hindsight, it seems he could have been a prolific writer on so many topics in the last few years. Instead, he prioritized his family, caring for our mother in her illness, looking out for his children and grandchildren, and of course, the maintenance of his great love, the house, which he fashioned into a kind of grand central station. Dad was always hungry to improve himself, but over time, His ambitions shifted from commercial legal success to a Zen-like pursuit of being in the present moment. He was working on something his entire life, exploring ideas and coming up with schemes to the very end. He seemed to us as though he was constantly evolving, even transcending, though he would be appalled if he heard me say that. Our parents, who we nicknamed Fergaline, were a masterclass in tolerance. For years, they entertained the many of our friends who flocked to the house or were welcomed on holidays with them, including, notoriously in my case, the 8 of my friends who gate-crashed my parents' summer Italian trip 20 years ago. We had many long-stay family tenants and lodgers, each of whom became a special part of the household. So utterly unconventional, but totally authentic, Fergaline were hipsters, pioneers of sustainability, thrift, veganism, the figureheads of a family, referred to by one of Frank's friends as the Royal Tenenbaums. As children, our parents were relaxed about so many things, but certain fundamentals were non-negotiable. TV, junk food, and mass attendance were strictly regulated. Maggie recalls Dad's exasperation at one of many episodes of her teenage misconduct as he told her, "You have ruined my sabbatical." Dad was not a saint. He was devotee of the creative solution, or what seemed to me to be harebrained, convoluted ideas, driving us all to the brink with complex permutations for any plan. He was obstinate, refusing most offers of help, firing ahead with whatever he set his mind to. Renewing his passport to travel to Italy and then Spain last year, months after a terminal diagnosis. But our parents were consummate hosts, welcoming family, friends, waifs, strays, and dignitaries to the house with equal ease and generosity. Dad was no stranger to a Hoover, the king of table setting and absolutely obsessional about ensuring wine glasses were kept filled. The importance of hospitality, of giving and sharing, was something he learned from his mother in Ross's Point. He and his 8 siblings all got it. They shared a neurotic compunction for returning money to each other and fighting endlessly to be the one to pay for every tiny thing. Dad's stated revulsion for anything he perceived showy was tested after he bought a castle in 1993. He insisted on dropping Clonskeagh Castle from its address and reverting to 80 Whitebeam Road, resulting in decades of confusion for anyone trying to find the house, which we were brought up to describe as the house with turrets. He had exquisite taste. He appreciated quality and detail and craft, though he also nurtured an ardent passion for making do, with the result that antique bergère armchairs still rub shoulders with couches fished out of skips and repurposed by him. Homespun upholstering was actually one of his lesser-known interests. He bought fine clothes for his wife, his daughters, and his son, but for himself wore the same corduroys for 40 years. Until recently, he was still wearing his dressing gown from boarding school. He inherited a devotion to DIY, and with his 3 overflowing toolboxes, he would think nothing of spending hours on any tiny problem or project. It might be fixing a broken tap, or carving a miniature Brian O'Driscoll from wood with his grandson Liam. When the news came that he needed a quadruple heart bypass in 2010, there were gasps of horror as we guiltily cast our minds back to the prior bitterly cold Christmas Eve when he had spent hours down a manhole ramming a blocked pipe with a sewer rod. At times, the house seemed like an extension of himself, and it is bittersweet that the works were recently completed to such beautiful effect. Dad was Papa to Matthew, Liam, Alice, Sasha, Luca, Hector, Jason, Frankie, and Beatrice, and his love of his grandchildren was boundless. He had a unique level of respect for babies, and he treated them as equals. A distressed child would receive a steadying hand and be asked most sincerely by their papa, "What is it that you need?" His trademark grandparenting style was to combine DIY jobs with babysitting, marrying a constant vigilance for how warm our babies were, with a willingness to teach toddlers how best to operate a Stanley knife or a child how to use a saw. He had an incorrigible bent for dipping his finger into his wine to allow little ones a taste, and it's an unusual grandad who brings his charges to toddler yoga. On the many occasions during the years that we lived with him that Dad put my children to bed, he unashamedly undid all of my efforts to get them to fall asleep independently, crouching by their cot to hold their hand while gazing lovingly into their unsleeping eyes. Dad's experience of cocooning during the pandemic included having a grandchild on his knee, eating directly from his breakfast bowl in flagrant contravention of all public health guidance. Dad's devotion to Mum, to us, his children, whom to the end he never stopped worrying about, didn't preclude him from extending unconditional love to other family members and to his many very special friends. His capacity to think of and to hold a space for people outside of his family was limitless. He was always thinking of and praying for others, as well as actively looking after people. He was interested in everyone he encountered, gathering and accumulating friends from every corner of life, and his empathy and concern for others was bottomless. Hours before he died, although beginning to slip in and out of consciousness, he asked Katie and me, "Who do we need to pray for?" before naming a small number of friends. He was connected on such a deep level to so many people. Because of this, we are acutely aware for those of you for whom Dad's loss has opened up a deep chasm, and we extend our love to you. In the outpouring of grief of the last few days, many words have been used to describe Dad. Present, gentle, gifted, kind, brilliant, wise, thoughtful, compassionate, insightful, forgiving, unselfish, ever-changing, counsellor, mountain goat, baby charmer. Since his diagnosis, whenever I was in Dad's company, I found myself longing to mine nuggets of wisdom from him, as though I could somehow preserve his essence in myself to sustain me beyond his loss. I'm afraid this proved impossible. In losing Ferg, we have lost so much more than a father, our greatest champion, our closest ally, our confidant, our free babysitter, our figurehead, our guru. Dad found the past years difficult. From caring for Mum to grieving her loss, to the isolation of the pandemic, and finally his own cruel illness. His response to his diagnosis was to enroll himself in an online course on gratitude. He believed in prayer. A committed meditator, Dad began each day by invoking Mum. That his suffering has ended is cold comfort to us all. But at least, in caring for him, we had an opportunity to express our deep love. He protested these efforts to the very end, beseeching us to go home and rest. Dad, once more with feeling, may you be free from suffering. May you be at peace.
So thank you so much, Grace and Frank, for those extraordinary words, and greatly appreciate it. And to all, thank the family for the wonderful way they've prepared and helped us to celebrate this special Mass for Fergus today. And to thank you all for, of course, coming to support Fergus's family with your friendship and your prayers. It's very, very greatly appreciated.